They designed your life and called it free will. What if everything you've ever called a choice was already chosen for you? The greatest trick of control is making the prisoner believe they are free. Maybe that's the trick you've been living. A life where you picked your job, your city, your partner, your beliefs, only to wake up one morning and feel like none of it really came from you. A quiet discomfort you can't quite name, like a background hum in your soul that keeps whispering, "This isn't really me." You were told you're in control, that your life is yours to create, that free will is your birthright. But what if that freedom was a script, one written so carefully that even your resistance was part of the plan? Look closely. You were given choices, yes, but they came in pre-approved boxes. Pick A or B, be this or that, win or fail. All paths leading to the same place, obedience disguised as autonomy. And here's where it gets deeper. This isn't about conspiracy, it's about conditioning, emotional, energetic, generational, invisible. Before you knew who you were, they showed you who to be. Not with words, but with rewards, with punishments, with silence, with patterns. You didn't choose them. They were installed in you. And the more you tried to break free, the more the script adapted. Because even rebellion was part of the design. This video might not free you, but it will show you the strings. It will reveal how deep the programming goes, how the blueprint of your life was laid out long before you were old enough to question it. Not just by systems and institutions, but by emotional repetition, by energetic memory, by the subconscious codes passed down to you before you even had language. Now, we go deeper. In the next section, we'll explore how your desires, beliefs, and even your identity were shaped before you were aware. We'll look at how the invisible blueprint was embedded in you, and why the life you think you chose might actually be the result of silent conditioning layered in your nervous system since birth. The invisible blueprint, how your choices were installed before you were aware. You think you've been choosing your life. But what if the map was drawn for you before you could even read it? Before you were aware of yourself, the blueprint was already forming, through the words spoken around you, through the emotions left unspoken, through the patterns you absorbed, not because you understood them, but because your nervous system was too open to filter anything out. Think of it like this. You were a sponge, not a sculptor. Soaking up family dynamics, cultural values, gender roles, spiritual narratives, fears, expectations, rules of love and survival. You didn't choose any of it, but they became your default setting. Bruce Lipton's research explains that between the ages of 0 and 7, our subconscious is wide open. We are in a state of deep receptivity, absorbing information without the filters of logic or discernment. And everything that enters during that time doesn't just become memory. It becomes reality. It becomes the internal architecture that decides what feels normal, what feels safe, and what feels like you. But what if that version of you is a carefully curated echo? Let me show you how this works. Imagine a child raised in a home where love was conditional, where approval came only when they succeeded, obeyed, smiled. That child grows up believing achievement equals worthiness. Later in life they say, "I chose this high-pressure job," but they didn't. The job chose them, through a belief that was installed before they even learned how to speak their truth. This is the invisible blueprint, not written in ink, but in repetition, not etched into stone, but into the nervous system. You carry it not as memory, but as identity. And here's the twist. The more it feels familiar, the more it feels like your choice. But that's how programming works. It hides inside what feels normal. It wears the costume of who I am. But what if the most powerful truth was hiding where you never thought to look? What if your deepest discomfort is not because you're lost, but because you've been living someone else's map? Let me explain. There's a difference between a conscious decision and a reflex, between choosing and reenacting. And most people live their lives reenacting beliefs they never questioned, ideas of love, success, safety, and self-worth that were handed down like old clothes. They don't fit, but you wear them because they were there. And every time you try to break the pattern, it feels like a betrayal. Not because it is, but because the blueprint equates change with danger. Let's go even deeper. We'll explore the illusion of free will, not as an abstract concept, but as a biological reality. We'll look at how neuroscience and ancient texts both suggest that most of what we call decision is actually pre-reaction, a pattern firing before thought arrives. And we'll uncover how even your spiritual journey might be part of a script that was written before you could remember agreeing to it. The free will illusion, what neuroscience and ancient texts reveal. You think you're deciding, but your body already decided, moments before your mind even knew a decision was being made. That's what neuroscience is showing us. That choices begin not in conscious awareness, but in the subconscious field, in neural signals, electrical impulses, stored reactions. Studies have revealed that the brain starts preparing an action nearly 7 seconds before a person becomes consciously aware of their decision. 7 seconds. That means what feels like a choice is often just a preloaded response being delivered to your awareness as if it were original. But you've seen it before. You just didn't know how to read it. You've felt the delay between intention and action. You've noticed how your mouth speaks before your mind catches up. You've watched your body walk towards something that your soul already questioned. That lag is the evidence. Now let's stretch beyond science. Let's go back thousands of years. Ancient texts, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Dead Sea Scrolls, speak of destiny not as limitation, but as design. A soul chooses its path before birth. Agreements are made, contracts sealed. The ego forgets, but the essence remembers. And what we call awakening is not about escaping destiny. It's about remembering the part you played in designing it. These ancient teachings didn't deny free will, but they placed it in a different layer, not in the moment of reaction, but in the moment of incarnation. The will was exercised when you chose the conditions you would forget. The forgetting was part of the plan. Let me say it another way. What if your free will exists, but not where you thought? Not in the everyday choosing, but in the soul's agreement to learn through a specific storyline. Not in the moment you said yes or no, but in the energy that shaped the need to decide. The you who thinks it's deciding is not the full you. It's the surface you, the tip of the iceberg, the echo. And here's where it gets even more real. Because if you've been living under the illusion of free will, if your choices are mostly conditioned, rehearsed, or inherited, then that would explain the resistance. That would explain why breaking old patterns feels like death. Because to reclaim your true choice, the conditioned you has to dissolve first. Now let's go further. We'll explore the hidden loop. That strange, repeating sensation of being stuck in cycles that don't feel like yours. We'll uncover why you keep reliving stories that seem foreign, and how emotional memory, not logic, keeps bringing you back to the same chapters. And we'll begin to see how real liberation begins. Not by rewriting the story, but by waking up inside it. The hidden loop, why you keep repeating patterns that don't feel yours. You've probably asked yourself this more than once. Why am I here again? Why does this keep happening? Why does this feel so familiar and yet so wrong? There's a reason for that, and it has nothing to do with failure, weakness, or bad luck. It's the loop, a hidden emotional loop that plays beneath your decisions, beneath your logic, beneath your awareness. It's not just in your thoughts. It's in your cells, in your breath, in your posture. It's in the way your body tenses around disappointment, the way your voice changes when you're about to be ignored, the way your chest tightens when love starts to feel unsafe. Joe Dispenza calls it simply, the body is the mind of the past, and the body remembers. Even when your thoughts say you've moved on, your body still walks the same path, still reacts to the same cues, still expects the same ending. Here's the process. An emotional event happens. You feel it. But instead of fully processing it, you survive it. You move on, but the energy stays. The story may shift, the people change, but the emotion, the root, gets stored in the body, and your nervous system, trying to protect you, begins to anticipate similar situations. It becomes vigilant, it starts reacting early, and the loop forms. You don't just relive memories, you relive energy, and the loop doesn't need your permission, it just needs repetition. A few reinforcing moments, and it becomes your baseline, your identity, your normal, until one day you wake up and feel like your life is running on someone else's script. Because in many ways, it is. You inherited the pattern from a parent, a culture, a wound passed down through generations. Maybe it never even started with you, but now it lives in you. And this is where the pain gets sharper, because you know you're not this loop. You feel it's not your truth. But every time you try to break it, something inside you freezes, shuts down, or pulls you right back in. Because the loop doesn't break with willpower, it breaks with presence. Let me say that again. The loop doesn't break with willpower. It breaks with presence, not force, not fixing, presence. Letting yourself feel the discomfort without judging it. Letting the emotion rise without labeling it wrong. Letting the body speak without interrupting it with explanations. Because that loop you're trapped in, it's not your enemy, it's your alarm clock, it's the soul knocking again and again saying, you've lived this part long enough, you're ready to remember something else. Let's move deeper. We'll unravel something even more subtle, the trap of performative freedom. That strange phenomenon where even your attempts to be authentic are still shaped by programming. We'll explore how what feels like truth might still be adaptation, and how the very identity you've claimed could be another mask sewn by the Matrix. The trap of performative freedom, when authenticity is still programming. You've probably heard it 1,000 times. Just be yourself. But what if the self you're trying to be was never truly yours to begin with? This is the trap that so many fall into and never see. The illusion of authenticity. Because even rebellion can be scripted. Even your version of different might just be a pre-approved archetype. Even your self-expression might still be operating within invisible walls, built by expectation, culture, trauma, and survival instinct. Let's unpack this. You were told to find your path, speak your truth, express who you are, and maybe you did, to the best of your ability. But did you ever stop to ask, who gave me this definition of authenticity? Where did it come from? What parts of me are real? And what parts were created just to avoid rejection or gain approval or feel seen? Because here's the truth that's hard to swallow, and even harder to notice. Much of what you call yourself is still reaction. You're not just acting out who you are. You're performing who you learned to be. Your aesthetic, your beliefs, your tone of voice, your preferences may feel personal, may feel chosen, but often they're strategies. Strategies to belong, strategies to survive, strategies to be safe while still feeling unique. And that's the trick. The Matrix doesn't need to control your every move. It only needs to install a few invisible boundaries and then give you the illusion of freedom inside them. It lets you choose your costume, just not your role. Let me give you a modern example. Think of social media, platforms designed to celebrate authenticity, yet filled with templates of how to talk, how to dress, how to be raw in just the right lighting, with just the right tone, Authenticity, curated, truth, formatted, individuality, mass-produced. It's not just online, it's in the way we talk about healing, about relationships, even about spirituality. All wrapped in language that sounds personal, but often hides how deeply we're still trying to earn love, to prove value, to be enough. But what if the most dangerous programming is the one that feels the most like you? What if the mask has been worn so long, it grew skin, and now the real question emerges. Who would you be if no one taught you how to be? If you stripped it all back, the style, the story, the defense mechanisms, the rehearsed personality, what would be left? The answer isn't easy, because it's not a concept, it's a sensation, a frequency, something you remember, not something you invent. Let's keep going. In the next section, we'll shift toward the practical. I'll show you a technique, subtle, powerful, repeatable, that begins to disrupt the script. A process that doesn't ask you to fight the matrix, but to step outside of it, breath by breath, choice by choice. We'll talk about the nervous system, presence, and the one moment where real freedom begins to return. A technique to disrupt the script, how to reclaim a real choice. Real freedom doesn't start with a fight, it starts with a pause. It begins in the exact moment you catch yourself about to repeat, not just the words, not just the action, but the feeling, the reflex, the old story rising like muscle memory. That's the doorway, and once you learn to recognize it, you begin to write something new. Here's the process. Step 1. Observe the inner pattern. Without reacting, when something triggers you, a look, a comment, a situation, instead of instantly responding, wait. Feel the heat, the tension, the surge, but don't follow it. Just observe. Name what you're feeling, not intellectually, but energetically. I feel constriction. I feel urgency. I feel abandonment. That naming creates space, and space is where the script starts to lose control. Step 2, breathe into the space and soften the body. The nervous system is the keeper of the loop, but it can be rewired. Slow, conscious breathing activates your parasympathetic system, your inner signal that says, I'm safe now. As you breathe, notice the body. Drop your shoulders, soften your jaw, feel your feet. These micro adjustments are not small. They are vibrational recalibrations. They shift the frequency that held the pattern in place. Step 3, choose from the new state, not the old habit. Only after softening, choose, not from fear, not from the need to protect, but from presence, from clarity. From that place inside you that feels light, not rehearsed, not familiar, but real. That is the beginning of freedom, not the absence of influence, but the presence of awareness. Let me say that again. Freedom isn't about having no programming. It's about no longer being ruled by it. And yes, this practice is subtle. Yes, it takes repetition, but each time you do it, something rewires. A new path begins to open, and the loop loses its grip. You won't notice change at first, not dramatically. But one day, you'll look back and realize you no longer react the same way. You no longer abandon yourself in the same places. You no longer disappear just to be accepted. You are beginning to choose. For real. Now let's go even deeper. Now we'll explore a metaphor that might stay with you for the rest of your life, the marionette. We'll examine what happens when you cut one string at a time, instead of trying to break the whole puppet apart. We'll see how gentle, precise liberation leads to something even more powerful than rebellion. Embodiment. Metaphor of the marionette. What happens when you cut one string at a time? Imagine a marionette suspended by threads, moving only when pulled. Now imagine that puppet is you, not metaphorically, literally, because if you've lived your life responding to scripts, reactions, programming, then every move you make is influenced by strings you cannot see. But here's the revelation. You don't need to rip the strings all at once. You don't need to break the entire puppet apart. You just need to start cutting. One string at a time. And with each cut, you remember something you forgot. One string is the voice in your head that tells you to be smaller so others don't feel threatened. Another is the reflex to say yes when your body is screaming no. Another is the impulse to overachieve, to be useful, to prove you're worth loving. None of these are you. They're strings, conditioning wrapped around identity. But what if you didn't fight them? What if you simply started noticing, gently, consistently, honestly, like this? You wake up and feel the urge to check your phone, not because there's something urgent, but because the silence feels unsafe. That's a string. You get a compliment and immediately downplay it. That's a string. You feel joy rising, and then quickly suppress it because someone once told you not to be too much. That's a string. And each time you notice, really notice, without judging, without reacting, you weaken its hold. Cutting a string isn't violent, it's sacred. It's the act of reclaiming movement, your own movement, not the one dictated by unseen forces. And here's the beauty. The puppet doesn't collapse, it begins to dance, for the first time, on its own terms. This metaphor isn't just poetic, it's practical, because when you stop trying to fix yourself and start freeing yourself, even gradually, even imperfectly, everything shifts. You don't have to become someone new, you just stop performing the version of you that was created for survival. And that shift is everything. Let's go one layer deeper. In the next section, we'll explore the soul contract. The idea that your entire journey, including your programming, was part of an agreement you made before this lifetime. We'll talk about what it means to remember that contract and how doing so changes everything about the way you see your pain, your patterns, and your power. The soul contract, what you agreed to, before forgetting it all. Before you had a name, you had an agreement. Before your body took form, your soul chose a path. Not because you were bound, but because you were bold. This is the soul contract, the idea that before incarnation, your essence met with others, soul groups, guides, energies, and made choices. Choices about what you'd forget, what you'd carry, what you'd struggle with, what you'd wake up to, and most importantly, what you came here to remember. You didn't come here by accident, and you didn't choose ease. You chose growth, expansion, awakening through contrast. The family you were born into, the limitations you've faced, the loops you've lived, none of it is random. It's architecture, spiritual design meant to trigger the exact lessons your soul knew it needed. That doesn't mean you deserve the pain. It means your soul trusted your capacity to transmute it. Edgar Cayce once said, "Souls choose the lessons, not the conditions." So your conditions may have been harsh, but the lesson was always yours to shape. And here's the twist most people miss. You didn't come here to escape the script. You came to remember that you co-wrote it, to reclaim authorship, to look at the pain, the pattern, the programming. And instead of running, say, "I see you, and I know why you're here." That's the moment the contract becomes conscious. That's when karma becomes evolution. That's when the soul starts to lead again. Not the wound, not the fear, not the code. And yes, the remembering is hard, because it comes through emotion, through rupture, through peeling back layer after layer of what you thought was you. But when the soul remembers, everything shifts. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What part of me chose this for my becoming?" That single question can change your life. And if you've made it this far in the video, take a moment to breathe, to feel, to honor the version of you that stayed, listened, and opened. You are not alone. And your story matters. If this resonated, if you've ever had a moment of remembering or a glimpse beyond the veil, share it with us in the comments. Not just to be heard, but to be a mirror for someone else. Someone who might be walking the same loop and not even know it. We're almost there. In the final section, we'll bring all of this home. We'll integrate everything we've uncovered, the blueprint, the illusion, the loops, the mask, the liberation, the remembering, into one final message. One that doesn't just close a video, but opens a door. They designed your life and called it free will. You made it to the end, or maybe in the beginning, because now the illusion isn't holding the same power. Now you've seen how deep the design goes, not as a trap, but as an invitation. They designed your life and called it free will. But you're starting to see the design isn't fixed. The design is interactive, and your awareness is the code that reshapes it. You were handed a script, yes, but you don't have to keep reading from it. You can pause, you can question, you can rewrite. Not from anger, not from rebellion, but from remembrance. You are not the puppet. You're the presence. You're the breath behind the motion, the space between the strings, the awareness that watches it all and chooses again. And even if you don't feel fully free yet, you're more free than you were before watching this, because now you see. And once you see, you can't unsee. You are not your programming. You are the field that holds the programming and can choose what to keep and what to release. You are not your wounds. You are the frequency that can alchemize them. You are not the product of your past. You are the threshold of a future only you can build. Write this in the comments if it resonates. I remember what I agreed to. Let it echo, not just for you, but for someone else who needs to feel seen. Thank you for being here, for bringing your presence, for walking this path of remembrance with me, for your courage to feel, to question, to expand. If this message stirred something in you, if you felt even a flicker of truth, share it. Like the video, subscribe to Echoes of the Path, because this journey isn't linear. And the next step might be waiting for you in the very next video. You don't have to walk alone. And remember, you are not at the mercy of the outer world. You are the field that transforms what vibrates around you. What you feel is trying to teach you what you forgot. Every emotion is a vibrational key. You don't need to fight what you feel. Just learn to decode it. Your energy is a language, and the universe listens. Reality begins where your old pattern ends. If you felt the call, subscribe. This is just the first step, and what's coming next will take you even deeper.